Let's start over. I'm Brian Rosenwald. I'm the director of the Red and Blue Exchange at the, which is part of the SNF IDEA program. We want to thank the Andrea Mitchell Center for the Study of Democracy and the Penn Political Union for co-sponsoring this. And we also want to thank the Gamba Family Foundation and the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for their funding and support, without which this kind of programming would not be possible. Before I introduce our august guests, just going to give you a sense of how this is going to go structurally. I will ask questions of our two guests for about 40 minutes. Then representatives of the Penn Political Union are going to ask some questions. And then we'll do audience Q&A. You should have gotten a note card, and we'll collect those about 45 minutes in and ask those questions the last half hour. So I am thrilled to have our two guests with us today. Fred Guttenberg began a public life after the murder of his daughter Jamie in the Parkland school shooting in Florida. He also had suffered the loss of his brother from cancer related to service as a first responder after 9/11. Following his involvement in those tragedies, Fred has taken to the country, talking about his perspective, perseverance, and resilience. He wrote Find the Helpers and his follow-up book, American Carnage, with Tom Gaber. And he was a Johnson & Johnson and Dunkin' Donuts executive before his time as an activist. Joe Walsh is a former Republican congressman from Illinois who was elected in the Tea Party wave in 2010. Following his time in Congress, he was a talk radio host, syndicated in most major American markets. And he ran for president in 2020 as a Republican. He's the author of Expletive Silence, calling Trump out for cultish, moronic.
Can't even read the title.
Authoritarian con man he is. I have no problem reading that word.
No, I don't. I know.
Which came out in 2020. And he's the host of White Flag with Joe Walsh, where he has weekly conversations with other well-known people to model respectful conversation. And he's a regular on CNN, MSNBC, News Nation. So we're thrilled to have both of these guys with us. And the one reason that we are having this event with these two kind of diverse speakers is that they are friends and they have talked about issues, and that's unusual in our politics today. So I want to start with this. Are there issues where you've been able to find common ground with one another?
So I'll kick it off. And I'm going to start with the issue that divided us, but also connected us. So for those of you who don't know my story, my daughter, Jamie, was one of the children killed in the Parkland school shooting. In fact, this weekend, I was at the building where she was killed, walking Vice President Harris and members of the Gun Violence Prevention Office through the building, which is still an untouched crime scene, meaning still has the blood, the DNA, the shards of glass, the coursework on the desk that the kids were working. Because my life since that shooting has been all about doing something to reduce gun violence in America. And it started quickly after the shoot, this need to do something. And I got very active in media. I got very active on social media. And one of the things that I did is within a week, actually the day after my daughter was killed, when I went to this Parkland vigil, and I spoke to a whole crowd of people who were crying. It hit me that night. This was gun violence. And I went home and I said, I'm going to break the effing gun lobby and everyone connected to it. Part of that meant I was going to start demonizing people who I thought were completely wrong on this issue. Hence, this guy and I,
enter this guy,
went at it pretty good on social media for a while. And then something happened. This Father's Day, it will be 3 years. I started this initiative, mainly a social media initiative called Dads for Gun Safety. And the reason why I was doing it is, for all you moms in the room, I didn't need to convince you to try harder, to do more. Moms were there. For all you kids in the room, after Parkland, the movement and the effort, you kids were there. The group that just wasn't stepping up was dads. And I really was bothered by it. And so I started this initiative, and I wrote this whole letter, and I was asking people across America, dads, to sign it. And again, that's where this guy comes in, because he started responding. And at first, it was more of the normal back and forth that we had. And then out of nowhere, he said, you know, I really respect the hell out of what you're trying. And that led to pleasant back and forth between us and a phone conversation.
Somewhat pleasant.
It was pleasant enough. And then a phone conversation. And then on a visit of mine to DC, I had an incredibly lovely dinner with you and your beautiful wife back there. And we started to realize, I kind of like you, and I won't speak for you, but yeah, you like me too. And we started to actually talk, not against each other, but to each other. And we realized that just because he's a gun guy doesn't make him a bad guy. And just because I want to do something about gun violence doesn't mean I'm anti-gun. And we realized there are areas that we agree on, things like expanding background checks, and others. And so we found, while we still have a lot of disagreement on what to do about the issue of guns, we also found we have a lot of areas of agreement. And over the course of the past few years, we have found areas of agreement in other things. The number one being the need to defend the democracy of the United States. With that, Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for coming out. And thank you everybody who's watching this on the live stream. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
This is a crazy time in American politics. We have an election that a lot of people aren't excited about. To get you out on a what night is tonight?
Monday.
Is it a Monday?
Monday.
Woo, on a Monday night is wonderful. Thank you for coming out. I want to make one point right at the start. Fred and I disagree on most public policy issues. When it comes to the issue of guns, Fred and I disagree on most issues when it comes to guns. Fred and I agree on this, that if the American people don't get involved and engaged and participate in this thing we call a democracy, this thing we call a democracy ain't gonna last. Every time I'm with him, I want to point at him and remind everybody of something. Because Fred and I do a lot of talking. I do a lot of talking in front of groups individually, so does he. And I hear often from young people, oh, Biden and Trump, I don't want to get, no, I'm not excited. I don't want to come out. Oh, everything's bad in America. I don't want to get engaged. I don't want to do anything. He lost the most beautiful, precious thing you can lose in this life. His beautiful 14-year-old daughter. She was murdered. She was gunned down. And from that moment on, this guy has dedicated his life to making things better. He had every freaking reason in the world to just say, screw it, I'm done. I don't care about politics. I don't care about anything. I'm done. I lost my daughter. Remember that. Just always remember that when we all get disgusted and cynical and we don't want to get involved in politics. Second point, Fred and I did what almost everybody in America does now. 5-6 years ago, we yelled at each other. We got ugly. We got personal on social media. We got ugly and personal on TV when it came to this issue of guns. I'm a huge gun rights guy. Fred's a huge gun safety guy. We disagree. And we disagreed like how most Americans disagree now. That person you disagree with is your mortal enemy. I want to freaking kill that person. I want to destroy that person. I hate that person. That's where most of America is today. That's where we were until we said, time out, let's just talk to each other privately. And we started to do that. And a funny thing happened after 5 or 6 months of he and I talking privately. We became friends and we began to find some common ground. It helps.
And I just want to say, and I want the young people listening here and online to hear this loudly and clearly. You know, we've seen our politics over the past 20 years, fortunately your lifetime, look really ugly. It just is. There's been this demonization in politics where when you disagree, it means you have to demonize and turn someone into your enemy. And the incredible thing about you and I talking is while we have our, you're a gun guy, I'm a gun safety guy, we both came to this realization, we both want to reduce gun violence, and so the conversation was able to move to something different where we didn't have to hate each other, and that's how politics is supposed to work. I know you guys have seen terrible behavior in DC and across state capitals. I would argue much of that bad behavior is driven by the fact that too many of us for far too long haven't voted. And so we've ended up with some pretty extreme, ugly people. The more of us who vote, the better off we are. Voting is the fundamental right of our democracy. And so you're gonna hear me say this over and over during this conversation. In this election coming up in 24, nobody can sit home on the couch. If you want the right to continue fighting for the things you believe in, if you want the right to continue voting after the 24 vote, you can't sit home in 24. And the more of us who vote, the better people will have.
And look, Fred and I are going from campus to campus throughout this country until Election Day. The name of the tour is Two Dads Defending Democracy. It has nothing to do, this tour, with who we want to win in November. We believe that no matter who wins in November, this country is going to be exhausted, 100 times more divided, and the democracy will not last if the American people don't learn how to do what Fred and I do. We still struggle with it, but learn how to do what we've done. Disagree respectfully. Somehow we got to get there or the country's tanked. I don't care who the president is.
Are there issues where your dialogue has kind of led you to feel like, oh, I had a misconception about the people with whom I disagreed?
Hell yes. I believed in my head and my heart that he right there wanted to take away my guns. Understand something. I'm a former Tea Party congressman. I'm still a proud Tea Party guy. He's a sincere, committed Democrat. I was convinced when I first ran into him that he was coming for my guns. And I believed that, Brian, until I listened. I began to listen to him.
And I was convinced you wanted to do absolutely nothing to stop the next act of gun violence and to save a life until we spoke. And I'll never forget sitting and listening to you on background checks and saying to you, I kind of feel like you might go further than I would.
Baloney. Kind of. One other important point. I was part of the Tea Party wave that helped kind of to elect Donald Trump. I voted for Trump in 2016. If you Google Joe Walsh, you're gonna look at it like this. I was a really divisive guy.
Oh, he was. It was bad.
Well, you don't have to exaggerate, Fred. I was really divisive. I made up my mind 5-6 years ago. I can't go down that road anymore. It's a bad road to be on. So that's part of what drove me to reach out to people who disagreed with me on issues. The gun issue is a big issue for me. I reached out to about 6 to 7 gun control, gun safety activists. 5 of the 6 or 7, when I reached out to them privately, gave me the middle finger and said, "Get lost, Walsh. You're a crazy Tea Party gun guy." He's the only one who didn't say get lost. There's a lesson there.
Listen, and again, not that I only want to focus on the young people, but the lesson I always taught my kids, and I'll always use the plural. My daughter, unfortunately, I visit at the cemetery, but I've taught my kids this lesson since they were born. It's really easy to talk to and respond to people who we agree with. It's really easy. However, it is really necessary and important that we reach out and engage those who we don't feel we have common ground with, because it's through that process that we all grow and that we may find better solutions and better ways to go forward as a society. I tell my wife, I always tell my kids, we were born with the same brain. We're not all going to have the same feelings or the same opinions, but we still got to talk about it. And so when you started to reach out, it was the only, if I'm going to be true to what I taught my kids, it was the only option I had. And I'm thankful that I did, because honestly, I think what he and I are doing has to be the model for America going forward. Listen, there is an effort on many in the political sphere right now. You all watch the news, you know where it happens to create a hateful environment, that you have to hate the person you disagree with. And that is just simply not going to help democracy. In fact, like you said, democracy won't survive if we continue down that path. So as you look forward, I'm going to again implore you to vote. I'm going to implore you to pay attention to those who really fundamentally support democracy going forward, those who understand the concept of decency and civility towards your fellow person. Okay? Because as much as he can drive me nuts, I love the guy. I really do.
So we still drive each other nuts. We do, because we still will argue about serious issues. We've been out to dinner with Helene, and she's been like a referee, because it's not a super easy thing to really do. Like, I got my strong beliefs. Fred's got his strong beliefs. It's not all love and kisses.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you about, was what's the secret to disagreeing agreeably?
I think we're all obsessed with this phrase, common ground. We want to find common ground. This won't come across very well. Screw common ground. I think Americans just need to learn how to listen to each other. Like, when I first started to sit down with him, I wasn't looking to find common ground on the issue of guns. I wanted to know why Fred was going to take my guns away. I wanted to know why he felt the way he felt. So and I do a lot of this, all I go into these, whenever I sit down with somebody who disagrees with me, I have one goal. I want to leave that encounter understanding just where they're coming from. And so to me, it's all about listening. Mm-hmm. I just want to listen, so I at least understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, so one word is listen, because we all love to talk. But sometimes listening and hearing what somebody else is saying matters far more. But the other word that I would add to that is trust. You and I started to trust each other's motives.
And we didn't right away.
No, not right away. No, it took my wife. In fact, my wife, if she were here, she would say, "I told you for the longest time you can't trust him."
Yeah. No, that's a really important part.
But we've learned to trust one another.
When I reached out to him the first time and we started to talk privately, and remember the context here, we hated each other. That was hard for me because he lost his daughter. But publicly, we hated each other because of this issue. And when we first started to talk privately, I was leery. And I know he was leery of me. It took time.
It's building up trust. You're talking about democracy and the value of democracy. And I noticed this in a column last night from David French as I was preparing for this. He said that this was, I think, Friday. Only a minority of Americans are truly active in political debates, and they're exhausting and alienating the rest of the country. How do we get the other 70% or 80% engaged?
Oh, I love that question.
I disagree with the premise, but I'm a dark Irishman. I think
you go first.
Yeah, I think it's more than 20%. I think. Can I poll? This is not a typical crowd, but I want to poll this group of people. um, it's a yes or no question. And do me a favor, give me an honest answer. You're never going to see a lot of these people again. Just be honest. And by the way, that's another thing. How do you learn how to speak respectfully? You got to be honest with each other. You can't bullshit the person you're speaking with. So don't bullshit me on this one. Straightforward question. Yes or no? Should America, this country, stay together as one country, one people? Or should we break up? Think about it for a moment, and please give me an honest answer. Should we stay together, or should we find a really cool, practical way to break up? Raise your hand if you think we should stay as one country. Raise your hand if you think we should break up. Okay, again, this is not a typical room. The data I've seen on this question, sometimes I see 60% say we should stay together. I've seen 50% say we should stay together. I've seen 70. But I think that number, should we stay together, is lower than people think. So I don't
That
believe.
knocked the hell out of me, seeing the should we break up hands.
Yeah, no, well, and by the way, I'll be honest, 8, 9, 10 years ago, I'm raising my hand. There's a part of me that thinks we've crossed the Rubicon. We ought to break up. I think it's more than just 20% of the American people who think we're divided. I think we're a lot more divided than people think. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, I think it's more than 20%. I wouldn't call it anywhere close to a majority.
You don't.
I think it's between 30 and 40%. And the problem is, I think the minority is far more aggressive in their point of view. They're far louder. They dominate the airwaves, and they influence this notion of division and we hate each other. Okay. And that comes from, while it's a large number of people, it is a minority. I mean, just this weekend. Okay. So for the past 10 months, we've been walking elected Republicans and Democrats, FBI, Secret Service, law enforcement, administrators through the building where my daughter was killed, all in the hope and effort of teaching people what happened, what we can do, not just from a policy standpoint, but from the way we construct buildings and schools. And this weekend, as I told you, the vice president came. She wasn't the first person we walked through. She was actually the last. And a minority of people created a whole lot of noise, And I think you see that on every issue. And I think we are left with the feeling that we dislike each other far more than what is actually true. You know, Nicole Walsh always says to me, how in the world do you continue to have hope? And here's how. Because every time I go out across the country into any community, whether it's red or blue, any campus, I continually meet a majority of people who really want decency, civility, and democracy to survive, who really want to do good things to solve big problems. But the majority of us are far quieter. We're not as vocal, and we're not all as necessarily geared to vote. The minority, they're committed voters.
But see, again, this is just another example of an issue where Fred and I disagree. Because I think that number is much greater than 20%. I think we're much more divided than people think. But it's a fascinating issue.
Push back a little bit on that. There are a lot of issues, from reproductive rights to background checks to some of the immigration and border issues, where we see polling shows 65, 70% of Americans.
Background checks, it's over 85%.
85%. So you have these huge majorities, and yet the politicians dig in their heels. Nothing gets done. We don't actually accomplish anything. And by the way, these majorities are not always on the same political side.
Yep.
Sometimes they're on the left side of the issue. Sometimes they're on the right side of the issue. It doesn't really matter. How do we get the politicians to be more responsive when vast majorities of Americans.
I'll say this as a former politician. It won't happen till the American people show their politicians that they're not as divided as our politicians think we are. As a former Republican congressman, I was incentivized to be as extreme as I could. That's how I won a primary. Same thing goes on with the Democratic Party. If you are running in a Democratic primary, the more extreme you are, the better the better chance you have to win a Democratic primary. I was a conservative talk radio host. I was on Fox News. The more extreme I was, the more popular I was. Politicians are incentivized to be divisive and extreme on both sides, and our people in the media are as well, because they think that's what the audience wants.
After the Parkland shooting in the 2018 election, we fired a bunch of people in the House and the Senate who had NRA ratings, who were very divisive and who were very aggressive on the issue of guns in Congress. And in 20, we elected a president and a Senate, and we had, we again were able to fire people who were not wanting to do anything about this issue. When you fire candidates and you hire others who feel differently, you create a platform for change. And in fact, we were able to pass in a bipartisan way the Safer Communities Act. Now, I think the big answer to your question, okay, is to get rid of the divisiveness, to get rid of the incentive to do nothing, to get rid of the incentive to dig in your heels, more of us need to vote. The problem is too many of us sit home. And as long as that remains true, the likelihood is those divisive people will remain where they are. But if more of us vote, we will be able to moderate those influences and actually bring back good behavior.
Yeah. Fred's right.
Yes, I am.
Fred's right, but again, I say this as someone who was in Congress and as someone who was in the media world. If you want to get elected right now,
You gotta go through a primary.
there ain't a lot of real estate right there in the middle. Like, I want to be you know what? Send me to Congress. If I ran as a Republican or a Democrat, send me to Congress, and doggone it, I'm going to sit there. I'm going to reach across the aisle. I'm going to try to find common ground with Republicans, or if I'm a Republican, I'm going to try to find common ground with those good Democrats. Good luck right now trying to win a primary with that message. If I want a TV show, look, Kate, I know a lot of you young people don't watch cable news. Good on you. But look who does really well on cable news right now. The most crazy people way over there on Fox, and the most crazy left people way over on MSNBC. Who struggles? CNN in the middle, trying to be kind of in the middle, both sides. Nobody wants that right now. I think you do, but don't blame the politicians and don't blame Fox News and MSNBC. They're giving you what they think we want. Until the American people say, I don't want the extreme shit, I want a reasonable voice in the middle.
But again, it goes back to voting, because in a
Not just
primary, again, who votes? It's not a majority of either party in a primary voting, but if the majority of people who consider themselves Democrat or Republican voted in primaries as well, I think that will be a moderating influence on what we get. But people don't vote,
and it goes to what you watch. It's voting, but it also goes. Fox's ratings are gangbusters. MSNBC's ratings are gangbusters. CNN,
if you
people in the
wanna
middle, not
see-
so much.
Listen, I think 24 is the election where we either break the fever or we're in for some real ugliness. And the way to break the fever is to have record turnout voting unlike anything this country has ever seen. And if we have it, and politicians have no choice but to react to that, I think we still have the chance to turn the corner and get back to a place where democracy functions for most of us in a better way than it has been. But we better vote.
But last thing I'll say, Brian, and I know we're like a filibuster in here. Hey, what happened to our moderator?
Just a five plan up here.
No matter who wins in November, it's on us to keep this thing going. And I hear from so many young people that they're afraid to do what Fred and I have done. Like, it's hard, even privately, Brian, it's hard privately to sit down with somebody you disagree with and really talk about an issue like guns or abortion or the climate or whatever. And so I find, especially with young people, they're afraid to even engage because it's hard. And it can get uncomfortable. What Fred and I do, even privately, can be uncomfortable. I just, man, you got to get over that. We got to get over that. You can't be afraid to engage with people you disagree with.
With that kind of ringing endorsement, I want to actually get into some of those issues. In fact, the issues you just mentioned.
Now watch, we'll probably get in a fight.
But let's start with the issue that is so important to both of you. How do we address gun violence in this country when we consider it's certainly not something the rest of the world deals with?
Start.
Listen, so and it's part of why I wrote my book, American Carnage, because for far too long we were dealing with it with a set of information that wasn't always factual, but it wasn't always that way. And so I deal with the history of guns in this country in that book. And in fact, all the way up until 1977, this was a country which had plenty of gun owners, okay, but people were responsible. And we believed in gun safety. We as a country were a country that passed laws to deal with gun violence, that promoted gun safety. I'll give you an example. Just last year, you all might have heard of the Second Amendment Bruen Supreme Court case. The Bruen case didn't overturn some new radical law that people were disagreeing over. It went after a law that was over 100 years old, okay? Because we always passed gun safety laws in America. In 1977, the NRA shifted under the leadership of this guy by the name of Harlan Carter, who, by the way, nobody knew it at the time, was a convicted murderer, but he changed a vowel on his name. And Harlan started pushing the NRA away from being a safety organization into a political organization to start to counter what was a decline in gun sales at the time. And through the 80s, started funding BS science, started also investing in political work, and you really started to see the ramifications of that in the 90s. It wasn't until after 2000 that laws started to get passed. Now, you've all heard we shouldn't pass any new laws around guns. We don't need new laws. We need to enforce the laws on the books. New laws started to get passed. In fact, the very first one was in 2005, called Stand Your Ground. And then we started to see things like permitless carry and open carry. The laws getting passed weren't pro-safety. Now, it was the laws that the gun lobby wanted. And here's the result of that. In 20 years, and I use 20 years because my daughter should be 20. You're all probably right around 20. 20 years ago, you had 200 million weapons in America. Now you're over 400 million plus ghost. So you went from having far less weapons than people to having far more weapons than people. 20 years ago, AR-15 sales were less than 2% of all guns sold. Now they're over 25% of all guns. And I give you this information because it is imperative that we get back to helping America understand the truth. We've always been a country of gun owners. We've almost always in our history been a country that respected gun safety and responsible gun ownership. And we are now in a place where, because of what we've done in the past, called 25 years, that we do have 400 million weapons in America. So the conversation is no longer about, what are we going to do with preventing gun violence? We now have to have a serious conversation about, we have over 400 million weapons in this country. What are we going to do to ensure they're not ending up in the hands of the wrong people?
So, and again, Fred and I have a much, much different take on history of this issue, but we're not going to get into that now. What do we do about gun violence in this country right now? Here's what we know. This is look, I'm a big gun guy. This is a uniquely American problem, right? We have more guns than any other country in the world. By the way, that ain't changing. That ain't changing no matter what Fred does. 400 million guns now. In 7 years, there'll
Let's be
be.
clear. I never said
Hmm.
that we should just go take all the
Agreed,
guns away.
agreed. I'm just saying that number 400 will continue to rise. We have a thing called the Second Amendment that the rest of the world doesn't have. We're not going to argue about that right now. That ain't going anywhere. How do you stop gun violence in America? Make it harder for people who shouldn't have guns to get guns. That's an area where Fred and I found some common ground. Enhancing background checks, making it more difficult, really drilling down and looking into red flag laws.
Which, by the way, we passed 3 weeks after the Parkland shooting. Had those laws been in place before the shooting, my daughter would be alive today probably, because he was a known threat. But the law enforcement didn't have a mechanism to do anything. And so we passed 3 weeks after. They've been used 12,000 times since in Florida. And red flag laws in Florida are being used far more by the red county sheriffs than the blue county sheriffs. Red flag laws save lives, full stop.
Do what we can. This is where I think both sides can find common ground. Do more up front before a gun is bought. That's where you'll even find common ground with a guy like me. But once a law-abiding gun owner has bought a gun, don't you dare come for that guy's gun. And then the other,
Unless he becomes a known threat to himself or someone else.
possibly.
Yes.
But then the other aspect here is this is cultural. This is all, like there's no magic bullet. We have the Second Amendment. We have more guns than all other countries in the world combined. Those two facts are never changing. Never. So do what you can up front before a gun is bought, as much as you can. But a lot of this is cultural too. The vast majority of gun violence committed in this country is committed by criminals who have no business having a gun to begin with. We hear about the horrific mass shootings in every city and every rural community in this country. There are shootings every single day by people who are not law-abiding gun owners. I agree with Fred that the NRA and gun lobbying groups have tried to make owning guns more cool. And that's done great damage. Now we see members of Congress who on their Christmas cards,
Which is moronic.
show cards of them and their families holding firearms.
Which is just to put it in your face, but it's not an example of being responsible. And I think you and I agree on that.
Completely irresponsible.
Yeah.
We've made it too cool. We've gone way too far down that road. We've made guns too cool. But you know, only 50, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago in this country, high school kids in most parts of this country drive to school with a shotgun or a rifle in the back of their pickup truck or the trunk of their car. And they'd take marksmanship class in high school. Couldn't fathom that now. So it is guns, but something else in America has changed. Both sides need to recognize that.
If you could go back 50 years ago, you're talking a time when there was 100 million guns. We're now over 400 million. So there has been a big change. And back then there was a sincere emphasis on responsible, safe ownership that doesn't exist now because guns, there's just far too many in far too many hands. I think background checks, and he and I agree on this, must be enhanced. Loopholes must be closed. Private shows and other methods. We need to know who is getting these guns. I do believe red flag laws should be the law of the land with due process.
Yeah. Does everybody, is there anybody who doesn't know what a red flag law is? A red flag law is where if you believe your brother or uncle is a threat, he owns a gun and he's a threat to himself or others, you and or law enforcement can come, take that person's guns, and then that person has the ability to go to court and to try to make the case that he or she is not a danger to himself or others. Family members and law enforcement, they're called red flag laws. You can temporarily get the gun to make sure that person isn't a threat. It's a really interesting reform, but Fred's right. Due process. That person who bought that gun legally has a constitutional right that you don't want to step over. But these are interesting laws.
Florida law, which implemented a due process component, has been very successful. What surprised me is this state right here is not one of the 21 states that has a red flag law. And I was just with Governor Shapiro for a good part of the day. It actually has just made it through the House, the Senate. It's a bigger climb because it's Republican dominated, but he's working hard at it. It's part of why I was with him today. But this state should have red flag. Every state should. Okay, they save lives. We are now in a country of over 400 million weapons, and as much as Joe thinks this is a good thing, you know, it is hard to remove them from people, even when they are a known threat. So we have to get better about identifying who's a threat, okay? Because the reality is we can no longer ignore threats when someone has a firearm. They may
just like, and there are extremes on both sides. There are extremes on my gun side. There are people on the I can't stand gun side who would love to get rid of all the guns and who would love to repeal the Second Amendment. You say, what can we do? None of that stuff will ever happen in this country. No right in this country is universal. Every right, my free speech rights are limited. Every single right has certain limits on it. The Second Amendment has limits. We need to argue about what those limits are, debate what those limits are. But you're not getting rid of guns, and you're not getting rid of the Second Amendment.
That's one of the big myths that I challenge. The desire to reduce gun violence as part of the conversation in the real world doesn't involve a suggestion that we go and take away everybody's gun.
No, but Fred, you would acknowledge I know that, but I'm saying there are extreme voices.
Yeah, but they're not creating policy.
Oh, I know that. That's what
it's not in the real world.
Agreed, but I'm saying that those voices in leadership reflect both extremes. There are people on the left who do want to do away with the Second Amendment. I'm just saying, if you want to find common ground, that's not where to go.
And there are people on the right who want to pretend there are zero limits.
Zero limits at all. Yeah, neither extreme.
I want to ask some follow-up questions, but to try to keep the program moving along, I want to turn things over first to some student leaders from the Penn Political Union who are going to ask you guys questions for about 20 minutes.
Sure.
So Mika.
Hi, Mika.
Hi. Hello. I don't know if does this like work?
I don't think that's on.
I can project. Okay. Hey guys, sorry.
We want everybody to hear you though.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Mia. I'm president of the Penn Political Union. I'm a sophomore here at Penn. I also happen to be from the Boca Raton area. So I know MSD very, very well. So a couple members of the Penn Political Union are here, and we were invited to ask some questions. So thank you guys first for coming to speak. I think this is so important as an issue, and a lot of people obviously agree. So my question that I have is that from my work in the political space, kind of at Penn and just in observation, Penn seems to be a very socially political place. We're very motivated by activism. We're very motivated by a lot of deep issues to us. But when it comes time to really sit down in like more formal settings to talk about politics, I feel like that is something that the community at large has a harder time doing together, for more formal and set events. What could people in the political space do now, and what could people outside of that space do to better, as students on the student level, do to kind of capture a wider audience of people who might just be, not really interested in politics in general, but obviously we see the important need for that.
I'm going to actually answer that first. Before my daughter was killed, I was a business owner and what I call a goofy dad. That's who I was. I cared about politics. I watched the news. I always voted. I was, a guy who yelled at the television, but I wasn't politically active. I became politically active because of what I lost. And I think it's really important for people to protect their rights, to protect rights that they don't want to lose. And in order to do that, you have to start being free to use your voice. It's because if you don't, if the political system doesn't hear from you, whether it's in an op-ed or at a town hall or through your vote, then they assume you don't care and they'll do what they want. And so I think we need to get comfortable with the idea that as a democracy, fighting for what we believe in, for what we value, because we have it now and we don't want to lose it. Listen, bodily autonomy, okay? Whatever side of the issue you're on, it's a hot button issue right now. And and women have lost the right, okay? So but they're activated now. They're activated after they lost the right. I don't want people to have to become activated after, because here's the thing about this next election and why I tell everybody, I'm not telling you how to vote, but I will tell you, vote for the pro-democracy candidates, because after the 24 election, you're going to want the right to continue fighting for the things you believe in and not lose the ability to do so. You're going to want the right as a young person to have the ability to vote in future elections for things you believe in and not lose the right to do so. My political activism is all grounded in what I lost. I am trying to encourage people to become politically active before you lose something that you have, okay? And to fight for it, because it matters. Your voices matter far more than you know, but you need to use your voices.
And you specifically asked, and it's a great question, the how. How do you do this? Because the vast majority of people that I'm in front of are turned off and don't want to get involved. Everything Fred said's right, but how do you do that? How do we? I think a lot of it is modeling. Young people, especially in this country, look at our politics and there ain't much there to inspire you. And you don't see a lot of this on campus. I'm blown away, Gen Z, right? I'm blown away by the fear I hear when I talk to people from Gen Z, the fear to engage politically, the fear to get involved with somebody who thinks differently than I do. I think a lot of this is modeling. Gen Z needs to see it in action. But the biggest hint, that helpful tool I'd give is Fred and I learned how to do it when we went private. I mean, private.
Yeah.
If it's a great way to start. If you're afraid to engage politically, you're in a classroom with 30 people and you feel differently than 24 of the other people in that class, but you don't want to say anything because you don't want to stand out, man, try to take a conversation private.
Can I say something though?
Quickly.
Yeah. So since you're from Florida,
Quickly.
you know where the Florida Panthers play, right? Okay. So it's the hockey team down there, which by the way, beat Philly last night. Anyway. But I tell you this because last night, and my son works for the building where the Panthers play. And last night Drake was there. He had a concert. And Drake did something last night, which I think gets to the heart of your question. And he said to every single person watching his concert, I want all of you to turn around and talk to the person next to you that you don't know. And I want you, everybody in the arena is doing this. I want you all to find out something about the person who you don't know. He goes, I'm going to give you all a minute to do this. And like literally this entire building of people is turning around to someone they don't know to learn. Let's start talking to each other again.
I'm gonna impose a rule on both of us because we want to get to as many questions as we can. Let's you and I keep our answers
done.
short, concise,
Done.
brief. Go. Next.
Mark, I'm a member of the.
Speak up.
Sure. I kind of want to talk about instances that you want to promote dialogue. You have perhaps a contentious issue that has caused a lot of trauma, and maybe having that dialogue may cause anxiety or that uncomfortableness with that conversation. How do you facilitate a dialogue in that way?
With one person or with a group, or what's the setting? Like there's one person that.
It could be one person or it could be multiple, either or. I just think more in general when you want to promote like conversations like this between multiple people.
Again, I'll give you a really brief answer. We're in a country right now, and it's not just your generation. We are at each other's throats politically. And that either causes people to just get afraid, I don't want to do it, or I just turn away. This is not just with young people. The most helpful way to start is to take that conversation private. Take a conversation private. Talk to a friend who you disagree with about abortion. Go sit and have coffee with someone you disagree. One person. You start talking about your feelings on abortion when you're around another group of people. You're starting getting traumatized. You don't like it. It's uncomfortable. Find one person and work through the exercise of learning how to listen to that one person and have a conversation with that one person very privately. You're trying to train yourself.
I think, listen, for me, the most important thing I will do the rest of this election year is this tour with him. And it gets to the heart of your question. Because we're trying to show people how to talk to one another. But what I would say is when there's disagreement, that's okay. Usually what happens with disagreement is we start to question each other's motives and intentions. And that's where things go offline. And so focus on the disagreement and try to find an area where maybe you can actually have a reasonable conversation about it. So guns, for example. I immediately go to gun violence. You would probably just say guns. But the thing about it is, gun guy, gun safety guy, we both agree we want to reduce the gun violence death rate. We found a common ground. Like, okay, so how? I stopped questioning his motives and intentions. He stopped questioning mine. We're focused on the issue. I think when we question people's motives and intentions just because they have a different opinion, it sets a foundation for conflict. But if we don't, then it sets a foundation for trust.
Fred, by the way, I'll filibuster here because Fred makes a great point. Always focus on the issue, not the person. Always focus on the issue, not the person. Brian, do I need to watch my language? Fuck it. I mean this.
Helene, do something about him.
No, I mean this. Don't be afraid. I had a young Gen Z. She's a freshman at the University of Delaware. Brilliant young lady. I had her on my podcast, White Flag with Joe Walsh, last week. And she made a really interesting point. She said, Fred, that Gen Z is afraid to make moral judgments or moral distinctions. Our generation, man, we jump in. We have no problem making moral distinctions. We are talking about what's going on in Gaza right now. No, where I come from, it's easy. Israel good, Hamas evil. They're done. What's next? But even that issue, and then we had a respectful conversation about it. Gen Z is hesitant to make that kind of moral distinction. Don't be afraid. I'm going to be dead in 20 to 30 years. Fred's going to be a little behind me.
I keep telling my son I got another 15 years.
You want to turn this country around? It's your generation. It's not ours. Get off your ass. Don't be afraid. Nice and loud.
Systems that allow for that repeat. Are there certain voting, primaries, or maybe so forth that you can think possibly help with
I haven't even asked them about this shit, but we'd probably agree on damn near anything. I'm a Tea Party conservative. Open up primaries, jungle primaries, ranked choice voting, get rid of the Electoral College, change the way we redistrict. I got elected to Congress in 2010. I thought, this is great. I'm going to be here for a while. The Democrats controlled Illinois. They drew me out of a district. Republicans do that where they can. Change the way we draw districts, change the way we vote, get rid of the Electoral College. You and I probably
I agree on all that. And
open it up.
And I've even come to agree that term limits would be useful.
Every political scientist in the room.
All
just-
that. And I think big system-wide reform is coming.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, the political science literature is not very good on term limits. There was one more.
I will thank you guys so much for being here today. So I guess my question was just in the context of these conversations of like trying to reach out to people with whom you disagree. I was wondering, like, are there any beliefs that people can hold that you view as too extreme, or like that can't be reconciled, or like that you view as kind of like too far gone? Like, maybe
Oh yeah.
that would be
Okay, now do me a favor.
You know I want to go
That's a
first.
great question. I know. Do me a favor, but give me the short version.
Okay. Okay. Here's where he and I have a disagreement right now.
Major, and
Major.
we've almost come to
And-
blows, and we may.
I know, but I am at a place now where I just simply have come to this conclusion that MAGA and anyone who identifies as it, I just don't have a need to dialogue with them through the rest of this election. I just don't. I don't think they are participating in the idea of democracy. I think they've become okay with autocracy. And for me, that is the line. If you're not okay with the democracy, okay, then it's not even a question of issues anymore. And how do we agree on issues? We don't agree on what the country should be. So for me, I am now at a place, and it gets to your earlier question. I am only focused on talking to what I will call the 70% of America who still believes in democracy, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, independents, okay? And my only mission is making sure they understand the threat to democracy and getting them to vote.
So, disagree with
Yeah.
every freaking word he just said. This is a really important point. Love that. I disagree with everything he just said. If we were in a restaurant right now privately and we were having a cocktail, we'd get heated, but that dinner would end like this. That no matter what, when we yell at each other, no matter what, it ends with a hug.
And you want democracy to win.
Here's the deal. You asked a really good specific question. Is there anybody that's too far gone that I won't even engage? My answer is no, unless if you are a dishonest person,
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I can't engage that. But if you're an honest person and I don't care what your views or issues are. I come from MAGA. I come from the right. I'm a former Trump supporter. I don't believe there's anybody in this country politically who's unreachable. I talk to these folks every day. Unless you're a dishonest broker, there's no view that's too extreme for me to engage with someone.
But to be clear, and I agree with you on the honesty part, it's if I can't trust you because you lie, whether you don't tell me the truth or you don't tell the country the truth, a lie is a lie, then there's no ability to bridge that gap. The thing about MAGA, I'm not saying I've permanently written them off. I'm saying between now and the 24 election, there's only a certain amount of time. And I believe, rightly or wrongly, they are only going to vote one way. I don't think I can move them. So I want to focus on the part of the country that it still is deciding, should I vote or not?
But there shouldn't be anyone on an issue that you're afraid to deal with as long as they really believe in that issue. Like I got firm beliefs on every issue you can think of. I will sit down with the polar opposite of me on any belief, and Fred would too, as long as I know they're honest brokers. One quick example, Chris Cuomo interviewed Tucker Carlson a couple weeks ago. What the fuck? If Tucker Carlson called me up, no, if Tucker Carlson, that's my point. If Tucker Carlson called me up and said, Joe, I want to be on your podcast, I'd say, fine, but here are the ground rules. We're going to go over every dishonest thing you said first before you come on my podcast. Not an honest broker. There's no point to sitting down with someone who's not honest. No view is too extreme for me, though. Go ahead.
So
that was great. By the way, that's a great question. What year are you?
Remember, you said you're going to put limits on time?
Yeah.
So the questions in the audience fall into kind of three baskets. About a third of them are follow-ups on gun policy, so I'll start there. Bunch of different ideas that were kind of brought out here. Joe, someone wanted to know why you say maybe, not necessarily take guns away from someone who's broken the law. Someone else.
My answer on maybe is you better do it constitutionally. You better make sure that person's constitutional due process rights are upheld. That's all.
And then this, I guess, for both of you, how difficult is it to enforce red flag laws?
Again, they can be very easily abused. A girlfriend can make up a story about her boyfriend and say, he's a bad dude, he's got a gun. All of a sudden, the cops are at his door. These laws can be abused. They are right in principle. And even I say that, but man, they got to be really carefully executed and enforced, because they can, like anything, they can be abused.
Hence the reason for a due process component, and they can be enforced. And I think the key thing with red flag laws, and it's a really important part, is proper training. Okay, not just but to law enforcement, to local officials and the judiciary, but they can be enforced and they do work. But I agree, a proper judicial component is required.
Next question is whether you support mandatory minimums for gun-related crimes, 10 years for the first offense and life for the second offense. Would that be a deterrent?
Fred, I'll give a quick answer. I talked about the fact that we need to do, and I'm a big gun guy, that we need to do a lot more before a gun is bought to make sure a guy who shouldn't have a gun doesn't get a gun. We do a shitty job in this country when it comes to people who commit crimes with guns. I come from Chicago. There's about 17 guys in Chicago who keep committing 80% of the gun crimes in that city. I'm exaggerating slightly. We send them in, we put them back out on the street. You commit a crime with a gun, damn it, your ass ought to be in jail for a long time. We don't do that hardly anywhere in this country.
Listen, I think I agree with pretty much everything he said. We've got to do a better job before, and we've got to be harder after. And I think it's a good idea. However, there's another element to this. 90-something% of the guns that are used in gun crimes in this country come from about 6% of the retailers across the country. Okay. So when you think of it that way, the majority of retailers are doing their job to properly identify who's going to commit a crime through doing real background checks and everything else. There are bad actors in the retail industry as well. And now that we have a real committed ATF director, they're targeting that. And it's one of the many things that has gone into the reality that for the first time in 2 decades, we're actually over the past few months seeing a decline in the gun violence death rate in America. Okay. When you think of the work to punish bad actors, when you think of the expanded background checks, I was at the FBI facility in West Virginia 2 months ago where they do background checks and they're doing the enhanced under 21, which are part of the Safer Communities Act. They're actually intervening in a lot of cases now with kids under 21 before a crime is committed. Joe and I disagree on raising the age to 21. I don't think you disagree with me on the enhanced background checks. I think they're a good tool. But, you know, there's a lot of things that we must do to lower the gun violence death rate. And I think that's one.
But always remember this context, guys, on the issue of guns. And I'm exaggerating slightly. Yeah, we have a crap load of guns in this country. 98, 99% of all gun owners in this country are law-abiding gun owners who have never and would never commit a crime with that gun. I own 5 or 6 guns. I would never commit a crime with a gun. Never say never.
And of all the law-abiding gun owners, 76% of all the kids who use guns in a crime get them from an unlocked weapon in a house.
Right, but
so we also have to be responsible.
right, but just always remember that the vast majority of gun owners in this country are law-abiding gun owners who treat that firearm like they should.
And who agree with me, we need to do more to reduce gun violence.
Well, this is an important point. Filibuster. This is an important point. Because we do this on, and not just Fred and I, we do this on every issue. Damn near everybody how many, raise your hand in this room right now. Again, no bullshit, give me an honest answer. How many people in this room want to reduce gun violence in this country? Raise your hands. Okay, put them down. How many people in this room don't want to reduce gun violence? 99.99999, damn near every American on all sides.
That's not the poll.
Right, no, but all Americans on all sides of this issue want to reduce gun violence.
Yeah, and
we disagree on
when you get the specifics, even gun owners that, you know, vast majority agree on red flag laws, on background checks. Most also agree on raising the age to 21. You're still an outlier, but that's fine.
Not a huge outlier because it's not a 90-10 issue. Go ahead.
I like how you promoted yourself to the chamber with the filibuster. You're senator now.
Would you take control of this again? My God. We need
one more follow-up on guns. Would you support, and
No.
you think it would be helpful, some limit on how many guns someone can buy? Because a lot of the crimes in urban areas come from traffickers who go down to those 6% stores and buy 50 guns. And then magically they end up in the hands of people who couldn't legally buy a gun.
No.
Okay.
Yes. And magazine limits as well, which I've never
No.
missed. So I will tell you, one of the things when we walk through the Parkland building that I highlight for those who have walked through in the past 10 months is every time that shooter had to reload, okay, lives were saved because kids were able to run, okay? Magazine limits saved on the 3rd floor of the school in Parkland about 10 kids. Unfortunately, my daughter was at the back of that crowd running down the hallway and was the second to last to be shot and killed. But the 10 that ran through before her got saved because the shooter had to reload. Magazine limits should be the law of the land, but that's not a debate for here today. He's wrong on that.
So then the second batch of kind of questions was all in the area of dialogue and conversation. One person asked, how do you teach the American people to listen or understand each other? Another person asked, you mentioned shared trust, but the media and our elected leaders have eroded that trust. How do we change that narrative beyond our political sphere? And a third person asks, how do you get people like Jim Jordan and Mitch McConnell to engage and talk? I'll
Well,
throw that whole basket of how do we encourage a dialogue? How do we get around the media and the political class out there?
just two broad points, and then I'll turn to but quit bitching and complaining about our politicians. Our politicians are us. They're a microcosm of us. We're a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Our government is us, right? We don't like the way Jim Jordan behaves. We don't like the way those Senate Republicans or the Senate Democrats behave. I'm sorry, that's how we behave. Quit blaming the politicians. I say this as a former politician. Politicians will not change until they see the American people change. Period. I missed a part
Well,
of that.
that's a
though. Go ahead,
terrible
Fred.
answer. I disagree. No, hold your politicians accountable. And when you see that behavior, again, vote. You want Jim Jordan? Again, he's a guy, I think he's despicable. I think he is horrible. I think he's a loudmouth, all those things. But you know what? Put Democrats back in charge of the House, and then he becomes far less meaningful.
But that's a given. I agree with Fred on voting. But Jim Jordan, to your point, is in a safe district in Ohio. He'll never not be reelected as long as he wants to run. And there are Democrats like that. So we need to change the way we draw districts. But yeah, that's a given. What Fred said is always, that is your single greatest power, is to vote.
Yeah, and I think Jordan was, John Boehner wanted to draw him out of his district and realized he couldn't figure out a way to do it. Despite being the Republican Speaker of the House. Next basket of questions was 2024 questions.
Okay.
One is, if you want to get more people to vote, how do you respond to the fact that we have two of the least popular candidates, two people who don't resonate with the next generation? It seems like which you can live with rather than a get excited election. And then the end of this question was, are there people who are down ballot candidates who excite you for the future of national elections?
I'll start and then
Go ahead,
Fred
go ahead.
jump. And again, I know who I'm voting for in November. Fred knows who he's voting for. This tour is not about promoting a candidate or another candidate. But when people complain that we're stuck with Biden-Trump again, I got to watch my language. Grow up. Yeah, that's what you've got. If you don't want to vote for one of them, don't. There will be third-party candidates. But this is what your system has produced. You got to change the system, but you're not changing the system in the next 7 to 8 months. You got to get rid of the Electoral College. That ain't happening in the next 8 months. It's Biden or Trump. Oh, Joe, that sucks. Tough. Pick one. That's an easy vote for me. I know it's an easy vote for Fred. Change the system after this election. Period.
I'm not really, well, let me rephrase. I know they're both old. I get it. One's a decent guy, one is an indecent guy.
They're both too damn old.
They're both old. I think the current president, other than being old, has actually delivered a lot of the things that young people have said they want. So it blows me away that young people say what they do in terms of voting him again. Here's what I'll say. When in the world did we decide that in order to vote, we have to fall in love with a political candidate? If you want to fall in love, use a dating app, but you don't have to be in love with your candidate. So here's what I'll tell you to motivate you to vote. If you believe with me that we as a country need to do more to reduce gun violence, then you need to vote. And you know what? You know who to vote for. If you agree with me,
No campaign speeches. Be careful.
that we
Be
as
careful.
a country should sustain our democracy, then you know how to vote and you know who to vote for. If you agree with me that women should have a right to control their own body, then you know how to vote, you know who to vote for. If you agree with me that you want to protect the environment, then you know how to vote and you know who to vote for.
Stop.
You don't need to be in love.
Stop.
Hush. You
No,
don't need
come
to
on,
be in
Fred.
love.
Come on,
That's
Fred.
a dating app, but you need.
Come on, come on, come on.
So
Bottom line is vote.
let me ask a follow-up since Fred just answered it. Question from online. Which of the two candidates for presidency is best for democracy going forward?
You be quiet for 1 second.
I mean, he already gave us his.
Well, yeah, we know. Look, this isn't difficult.
It's easy.
This isn't difficult. In the entire history of this 248 some year experiment, a country we all love, only one American president has lost an election, refused to concede, refused to participate in the peaceful transfer of power, and then, and this is hard to even say now, and then that one president tried to overthrow an American election. That's only happened once. Our elections are the heartbeat of our democracy. You get rid of elections, the democracy's done. We know which of these two candidates is a threat to our democracy. End of story.
And I'll say, listen, I'll say something else. Joe and I both actually, as part of our democracy, believe it can't just be a one-party system. We believe there should be another party or more. We totally, but right now, there is only one party that supports the idea of the democracy. Only one. And so I believe I'll call them the non-democracy party needs to be annihilated. So the reasonable people whose voices are now muted in that party or are leaving that party can come back and we can get back to governing in a two-party system.
And by the way, go ahead.
I believe if it wasn't clear to you, the country, I'll say to you what I wrote on a tweet not long ago. This country survives 4 more years with President Biden. It does not survive with
But
Trump.
and 2 quick points, guys. And again, this tour never gets partisan. 2 quick points. What I just said there, would you really think about it, please? This has never happened before. This is like the deal we all have with each other, right? We fucking work our asses off every 2 or 4 years for the candidate we support, right? And somebody wins and somebody loses. And I've won and I've lost. And it's hard. But we all suck it up because that's the silent agreement we all have with each other. Somebody wins and somebody loses, and we all agree to accept that result. Only once in this country's history has somebody given that the middle finger. Don't you dare overlook that. Second point I'll make is go ahead and demonize Biden if you want, demonize Trump, demonize Jim Jordan, demonize Chuck Schumer. I don't give a damn about politicians. Don't demonize supporters of these candidates. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Let me ask a follow-up that kind of occurred to me while Fred was talking. It seems to me that we have an education gap in the country about how the system works and what is achievable and what isn't achievable. Some of these people angry that the president thought that he could accomplish a lot more than was practical for anyone short of a magician.
And it's like, if you don't give me everything I want, I won't vote for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do we need
I
to
love that.
do a better job of explaining the old legislative process of you need 60 senators, you need, a majority in the House, that divided government's going to limit what you do. Do we need to do more education?
And by the way, we have states that have their own sets of laws
that's right.
that may not be exactly like what we are seeing out of DC. And then there's 100%.
I'm sorry, I should know this. Do we still teach civics in our schools? No, Gina, no. Well, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're 100% right. We should.
I mean, I see this all the time on Twitter of people who are furious that Joe Biden didn't do things that were, I could have told you the day of the election, he couldn't do.
It's just, it's not the way democracy works.
Right.
The problem is the way democracy works is with people who believe in democracy working together for the common good. When people decide they no longer care, that they just want to put the brakes on it, that's where democracy starts to break down. And so it's a great question. And
We're
you're
not
right, we should
nearly-
teach it.
We're not nearly as informed as a people as we should be.
And Joe, to kind of dovetail with that, you're talking about systemic change after 24.
Mhm.
Do we need to explain to people, yes, we should work towards systemic change, but that's going to be a slow process. It's not going to be one election cycle. It's going to be 5, 10, however many years that you have to work for it.
Yes. I think we need big change, but it's not going to happen overnight. People don't understand that. People think you can just get rid of the Electoral College like that, like Congress could vote to get rid of the Electoral College. Hello?
But maybe it
two-thirds-
starts here. What gets taught in a university like this?
Well,
On what class you take.
Like, do you teach the question you're asking about? Does that get taught in a
well,
way
Gina,
where
you said in high school, are there civics courses in high school anymore that teach kids how government works?
Senator, the U.S. Senator, who could not name the 3 branches.
Yeah.
It's
I can only assume that's a junior senator from Alabama, but
This is a problem, and by the time you get to college, it's almost too late. We don't teach this
And
stuff in
by the way, the Annenberg School here does a civic literacy survey that if you want to be depressed, take a look at that and see how few Americans can name the 3 branches of government.
Yeah.
So we do have an education issue. I want to take this, our moderator's prerogative, to squeeze in one more issue, but a lightning round before I get to my last question.
Done.
The other issue that is so important to young people is climate. How do we do something about climate when, you have vast disagreements on how to address the issue, and you have plenty of people who don't even think it is an issue?
And again, Fred comes from a better place on this issue, because this is an issue 8 years ago, I would have said, climate change, hoax. I opened my eyes and listened and learned and grew. The 20 to 30% that believes it's a hoax needs to be educated. The people that, like any other issue, that want to work on common sense solutions need to come together and understand neither extreme is going to carry the day. You're not going to shut down the American economy because of the environment. By the way, this is a worldwide problem. Shut down our economy, it's not going to make a hill of beans. So it's finding common ground solutions like on any other issue.
Listen, one of the most dangerous things that I've heard said in the past 20 years, it's a phrase I despise, but it has become reality, is when Kellyanne Conway said alternative facts. Because we now are a country where you either believe in facts or you believe in alternative facts, which, by the way, are lies, but now in this new world, they're alternative facts. And I think climate is a perfect example of that. We all see with our own eyes what's happening. We all see it. We see the change. We see the bigger storms. We see the fires. We see the weird temperature fluctuations. We all see it, but we still have a significant amount of people who will argue that we're not seeing it, that it's something else. And I just think, you know what? Maybe it gets back to some of the earlier conversation where we have to start talking to people again in a way where once we start talking, we can actually get to a place where we realize there was a misunderstanding, where somebody didn't have all the information, but we have to focus on the issue. And, listen, for anyone who's not convinced of climate change, heck, I'll invite them to my home in Florida. I'll drive them around. I'll show them the changes that we're living through now. It's a real thing.
But always science-based, based on science and the facts. Always.
Since
Go.
you brought up alternative facts, I want to cram one other thing in, which is, we academics, there's never enough for us. How do we ensure that both sides politically feel confident and accept the results of our elections? Since that's an area where alternative facts have taken off.
Boy, the rant that Joe went on before, and I so appreciate it, because this idea that we wouldn't accept the results of an election is like a new thing. But now, how do we put that genie back in the bottle? And I'm not sure, because after the 24 election, if he doesn't win, we're going to go through it again. We're going to go through it again. So I'm not sure how you put that genie back in the bottle, except for it to be decisive. Again, I'll go back to it. I freaking need every American of age who's capable and able to vote. If it's decisive, if it's enormous, if it's clear.
Here's my fear. If Trump loses by a little bit, let me take that back. If Trump loses at all, most of his voters will not believe the result.
Right.
But I have another fear. Because of what my party, my old party has done, if Biden loses by just a little bit and Biden wins the popular vote, but loses electorally by a little bit, I believe that not Democratic politicians, because they're not there yet, but I believe a lot of Democratic voters then will begin to question the legitimacy of the process. I don't think Democratic politicians will do what Trump and all of these election denying Republicans have done. But Democratic voters, I guarantee you, will lose faith, begin to really lose faith in the process. And then I really worry about stuff.
And I mean, it would be the third time in 24 years that the popular vote.
Well, and by the way, this is going to continue. In my lifetime, I'm 83 right now. I've got 20 years left. Jeff, I'm not 83. In my lifetime, a Republican will never win the popular vote. So we're going to have this problem.
So I want to close with a question that maybe is most germane to all the students in the audience.
Yes, I know what it is. I want the University of Iowa women's basketball team to win tonight. Yes, go Caitlin Clark. What were you going to ask?
I forgot that the women's tournament, there's still games today.
Here's about the men's basketball.
Why should young people, you talk about, suck it up, you got to pick between the candidates on the ballot, but why should young people who might be disillusioned with the political process in general, who feel like nothing changes no matter what they do, why should they be involved and engaged?
Because you still have the freedom to do what you want to do. Okay. And that's now what's on the ballot. Listen, I get it. You're disillusioned. I completely get it. I don't blame you. But you're also now those who are close to being the ones that will run for office and being able to create the environment that you think would be best for the country, to manage this democracy, to fix the things that too many of us screwed up, to be quite honest. Don't cut yourself out of the chance to be leaders before you ever get the chance. And this is the election where you either give yourselves the chance or you cut yourselves out of it by sitting home. Never sit home. It's not the answer.
I'll give you a short answer, guys. What's the alternative? You walk away, you step away, you don't vote? Cool. What's the alternative? Shit's going to happen no matter what. And again, Fred is not going to turn this country around. This thing's going to be like this for a while. You guys are going to have to face this. It's your generation, period. What's the alternative? Not do anything? Fine. But it's going to be in your lap no matter what. So grow up.
Well, on that note, thank you to both of you. I think this was a very illuminating conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Brian. Give it up for the moderator, huh?